Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 2, Episode 2, Morality Bites. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happens within this episode. On an ordinary morning, Piper comes in having stepped in dog poop as someone's been letting their dog do its business in front of their house. And this has been an ongoing issue, which of course has annoyed the sisters. And so when they are given the opportunity, they see the man Nathaniel Pratt, who is letting his dog poop in front of their house, and Piper freezes him. Prue moves the poop so that he is the one who ends up stepping in it. And then we have Phoebe getting a premonition of her own execution approximately 10 years in the future. Leo then arrives, and Piper says, because of Phoebe's premonition, that she can't talk right now. She has something she has to do. And then he is called by the elders, so he then orbs away and goes to the attic where he turns the Book of Shadows so that it lands on a spell that will send the sisters to the future. When they get up there, they cast the spell, but unlike when they went to the past, in the future they possess their future bodies. However, they are not given the memories of what has happened in between, so they essentially experience a type of amnesia where they have forgotten the last 10 years but are in the bodies of their 10 years in the future selves and having to deal with their lives. Piper finds out that she was married, is getting a divorce, and has a daughter named Melinda, who is telling her that she promises not to use her magic as she goes with the carpool and will be left at her ex's house after school. And then we have Prue, who obviously is a workaholic and has become extremely successful. She now owns the business of Buckland's and other branches in other countries as well, but she has no husband. She had the people at her workplace don't have any idea who even her sisters are because she doesn't see them anymore. And it's essentially that while she may have gotten monetary success, some of the more important things like love and family she had put to the wayside and did not have, though she is surrounded by assistants, has a driver, so on and so forth. Anyways, they meet up and together and they have to think about how to break Phoebe out, because if they're in their future bodies, that means she's also in her future body, which is at the prison. While they're out and about, Piper gets startled, freezes, and we see how their powers have grown. Earlier in the attic when they were looking for the Book of Shadows, Prue also used her powers and completely blew up the attic with how strong her ability to move things had become, so we see future growth to their powers. And while they're outside, obviously somebody comes across them, starts screaming witch. They look, it's modern witch hunt because of what Phoebe did or was accused of doing. They are now hunting witches in the modern age. Leo arrives, helps them to get away. Once they've convinced him that they are their past selves, he remembers the mission that the elders had given him to go and basically turn the book to the future spell. He fills them in that he's actually the one that Piper married, that they're getting a divorce, and that Melinda is their daughter together. And to prevent them from essentially causing any more trouble, he sends them back to the manor while he's going to go and see Phoebe. When he goes and sees Phoebe, he essentially brings her a newspaper article, tells her that what she's being accused of she actually did, gives her the piece of paper. She sees it where she was able to fly and she had electricity powers in her hands that she essentially burned the guy's head, like electrocuted his brain while levitating him. And she happened to get caught on camera, which is how they know that she is a witch and also that she is a murderer. However, it is also revealed that he too was a murderer, that her motivation for punishing the guilty, punishing him, was that he had brutally murdered her friend and then gotten away with it on a technicality, and she couldn't stand that, and that's why she ended up using her powers in that way. And A line that is repeated several times throughout this episode is that there is a difference between protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty, and their job as witches is to protect the innocent, not punish the guilty. And so she basically comes to accept that she is in prison for the right reason as her future self, but of course she's not her future self right now, so she's still reluctant. However, Leo returns to the sisters who have been going through the Book of Shadows, and they find out that their future selves had a plan to break Phoebe out, and that some of the spells they were planning to use would fall under personal gain, but clearly their future selves didn't care about that. And they decide that they are going to follow that path and they are going to break Phoebe out. Piper and Prue manage to get all the way into where the execution is happening just before it begins. However, Phoebe then tells them that she deserves to be there, that this is a lesson that they had to learn, that they can't punish the guilty, and essentially allows herself to be burned. This, of course, learning that lesson allows them to be sent back to the present time so that they can avoid that future. And at the end of the episode, we find that basically when they go back to the window, because the guy who they needed to freeze and who was letting their dog shit in front of their house, turns out he was the one who was leading the witch hunts, Nathaniel Pratt, and that little act of revenge of theirs was their first slip into punishing the guilty rather than protecting the innocent, and also that may have been the trigger for his future witch hunts, which they hope won't happen. We also see them willing to take on new changes in their personal lives. Piper, seeing that she was with Leo and it didn't work, is more resolved than ever because she saw the little girl and that they could have been happy and that they were happy for a while, to kind of hold on to that, and is willing to work on it with Leo. And then we have Prue, who basically, having seen herself end up a workaholic with nothing more meaningful than money in her life, decides that she doesn't want to be like that in this world. So instead of going to work as she had originally planned, she decides that she's going to go out with Phoebe and Piper that evening and have a good time and remember to keep the fun in her life as well. Essentially, they've all grown as people and learnt their lessons. And now that we have rewatched the episode, we are now going to rank the episode on two separate lists. The first list is our mostly objective ranking, and then the second is the personal ranking list. So now we do our mostly objective rank values. I've highlighted the ones I felt applied to this episode. First, we have worth 1 point, our single episode main or supporting character introduction. And this, of course, is Nathaniel Pratt, who lets his dog poop on people's property without picking it up, and also then becomes basically the lead witch hunter who is running for politics on the basis of ridding the world of the evil of witches, which in this series actually means letting evil have the upper hand as it's no longer alone in hunting the witches that protect the innocent. But either way, not a great guy, only worth 1 point, only in one episode, thank goodness. We next have our multi-season main character growth, and this, of course, is the fact that each of the girls learned the lessons that they needed learning by their trip into the future. We, of course, have Piper more resolved to make it work with Leo and to work on their relationship, at least at this point. Prue wanting to not become a workaholic and starting to think about taking more time for herself and to have fun, which is something that she didn't really do before. And then we also have obviously all three of them, and mostly Phoebe, learning that their job is to protect the innocent, not punish the guilty, and using their powers for vengeance will only lead to execution, apparently. And this, of course, is worth 4 points. We then get some world building information. Obviously, we already knew that time travel was possible. There was 2 instances of it in the previous season. However, in those cases, we had a warlock coming from the future to the past, and then we had the sisters moving to the past where they were able to see their child selves and the family members that they had lost. However, in this case, we see time travel to the future and how it is different from travel to the past. In the past, they were able to see their child selves. However, in the future, they possess the bodies of their future selves with amnesia because they have no memory of the time between, which, as the episode shows, leads to quite a bit of confusion because they have no idea about their current lives or why they're in the positions that they're in, though they do sort of learn that throughout the episode and again learn the lessons that they needed to learn. We then also, as our final positive for the episode, have our main relationship development, and this, of course, is between Leo and Piper. In the last episode, it was kind of ambiguous where they stand. Even at the start of this episode, they are together. She greets him at the door. They kiss. They obviously have plans, but it is also implied that he's busy as a white lighter, she's pretty busy as a witch, and one of their ongoing issues throughout the series is that because he's constantly being called away, a lot of their plans are impacted, and this can cause struggles within their relationship, and that is something that they need to talk about, but even talking is something that they always put off. I believe Piper puts it as rain checks, the thing that we're best at as a couple. So that's giving us more insight into it. But then, of course, they travel to the future. She sees that they ended up married, that they had Melinda, but then also that that imbalance in time and priorities in their relationship led to them also becoming divorced in that future. But upon returning back to the present, we then have Leo coming in. Piper mentions it, and Leo tells her that he knows that it's always going to be a problem, but that he's willing to work on it. And she tells him to remember that he said that, obviously implying that she also wants to work on it because she wants to have the future where she has that little girl and she has that marriage, and hopefully this time it can end without divorce, is, I believe, where that character's motivation is going from. But that basically gives us an update on where they stand in the relationship. And with all of those together, let me see here. 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 brings us all the way up to 13. And then we do have some negatives on this episode as well. First negative, of course, is the negative messaging and behavior. Now, there's the one that the show wants you to grasp onto because, as I mentioned, they mention it several times throughout the episode and even through this little talking that I've been doing. They have also mentioned it. I've also mentioned it several times. Protecting the innocent is different from punishing the guilty. You can't go into that, blah, blah, blah. What bothered me, though, is the irresponsibility of the pet owner. If you are going to have a pet, a dog, it is understood that you have to take care of that dog before you buy it. As an adult person, you should know before you buy a dog that you are required to take care of that dog, not just its needs, but also to clean up after it. It is like it's your responsibility as a dog owner. You don't leave your dog shit on other people's yards. Especially because, like, say for example, they didn't have a cement front yard, but they had a lawnmower front yard. And then they mowed the part of the lawn that had shit there and they didn't expect shit there because they don't have a dog. And then they ended up like spraying it everywhere. That would be horrifying. Now, I'm fairly certain most places it is illegal to leave your dog shit out. Like you're legally required to pick up after it. But also, how are you going to enforce that? If you don't have a camera out front, even if the police come and you show them a camera picture, how are they going to find them? Are they even going to spend the time to go looking for them? Even though it is something that is illegal, it is not something that's typically able to be enforced, or it's very difficult to be enforced, and most law enforcement agencies wouldn't have the time. So it really is up to the owners to be responsible for their pets when they decide to get a pet. And so the fact that they had this guy leaving the dog poop around, he's the one who bothered me. And then he, of course, grows up well, not grows up, he's already adult, but he basically goes on to then go on this revenge kick against witches because he rightfully got his comeuppance. I didn't learn the lessons the sisters learned. I'm still pissed off about that. And I think that, you know, well, maybe they shouldn't have used magic. I mean, they did open the window. He did glance at them. They should have yelled at him, at least. Like, that's a non-magical way to say, hey, buddy, I see you, pick that up. Or be like, I'm going to put out a camera next time I'm calling the cops. I know where you live. Something like that. I feel like I would have felt more satisfied if that had been the case, rather than them just watching and him walking away. But that's just me. Anyways, either way, leaving dog poop in front of someone else's house, very negative behavior. That is worth a -2 points. And then we have the failed emotional impact. Now, my belief is that they got really emotional. They were talking about, like, letting Phoebe die. Even when they returned to the present, they at first had it where she was in a different room. So there was a moment where you had to wonder, is she okay? Is she not? And I believe that that was meant to kind of emotionally impact the audience. The fact that Phoebe had to burn and might have died, and then them kind of teasing us with her not being immediately there back in the present and instead coming in a little bit later. I believe all of that was set up that way to evoke an emotional response. However, it's the start of the season, so teasing us about, like, like the last episode, how they were teasing us about how they might lose their powers. It's like, we know it's going to go on and on and on. Even if we didn't know the future and that there was 8 whole seasons, but say we were back in the day and it was just premiering season 2, season 2, most TV shows, even if they're like a shorter season, will have at least 13 episodes. So on episode 1, they can't trick you into thinking they're going to lose their magic, because that would end the show at season 2, episode 1, and that's never going to happen. Same thing with this episode. It's not going to end at season 2, episode 2. There's going to be more, which means that Phoebe is going to live, and therefore, because there's no chance she's actually going to die, you don't really feel the emotional impact of her almost dying, because you just know that it's impossible, that it's not going to happen. And so you aren't really impacted by the emotion. Like, you can see the character's emotion, but you as an audience member, or at least me as an audience member, don't really feel that. And that is a -3, which then leaves us with an 8 out of 10 for our mostly objective rank values. And so we enter into our season 2 rankings so far. And in first place, we have Witch Trial. And then in second place, we have this episode, Morality Bites. Now we're on to the personal side of the rankings. And I've already done my little rant about pet owners needing to be responsible for their pets. If you're going to get a pet, you need to pick up after it. That's just common sense. You should not be leaving your dog's excrement on other people's property. It is rude. And in some places, illegal. Now, the other thing was, I found it funny when Piper and Leo first meet in, like, the present before they go to the future. He comes in the door, she greets him happily, but tells him that she's going to have to change the plans. Her and her sisters are dealing with something. And then he gets called away and says, that's fine, I've also just been called to work. And then Piper kind of, despite just telling him that she had to cancel, kind of gets annoyed at him for having to leave, even though she's already leaving, and then makes the comment about how, oh, rain checks, that's what we do best. And it comes off a little snide, and I'm kind of like, why are you upset? You were just about to cancel on him. Obviously, there are some women out there who are a little bit irrational with their emotions, and in this case, I think Piper really was, because if you were just canceling on him, you should not be upset that he now has to agree with the cancellation because he has something too. I was a little annoyed by that, to be honest. We then also have the levitation foreshadowed. We do know as rewatchers that there is a future in which Phoebe's powers grow to include levitation. It's not that far off, so it is a spoiler for the future, but again, we're rewatchers. This is an old series, you should already know that. However, the lightning power never really comes to be, and you could say that that's maybe the punishment for what her future self did. But then that brings me to my biggest gripe with this episode. She burns in place of her future self. She herself has not done anything yet. The future self is the one who deserves the punishment, and Phoebe acknowledges that her future self did something wrong and deserves the punishment that she is about to get. Sorry, I had to pause the recording and I can't quite remember exactly where I was when I left off, but I'm going to essentially start again. So excuse some of the repetition here. But basically, she takes the place of her future self. Her future self did do the crime that deserved the punishment, which is fair. However, her future self isn't the one who's having to suffer the consequences. It's the past self that is innocent that is having to suffer those consequences. And yes, she is learning the lesson the hard way, but at the same time, the person who actually deserves that punishment is getting off scot-free because her future self isn't currently at home in the body. She's being possessed by her past self and not having to experience what she like her due punishment, which I think is kind of unfair. I also think that it is unfair that the person who is leaving their dog poop out doesn't get any sort of repercussion whatsoever, as I feel like even if it was a minor repercussion, he should definitely have gotten some repercussions too. And then just overall, I feel like a lot of the episode was kind of taken up with them trying to figure out what their future selves' lives was and kind of just like that sort of discovery, which is interesting. It's just, it wasn't for me, the episode. The lesson didn't really hit or land for me, or rather, like it's such a minor lesson that I think they could have been taught a different way. And like I said, I do think it's unfair that the past Phoebe had to suffer the future Phoebe's consequences, letting future Phoebe, who deserved those consequences, off scot-free. Not fair, not even right. Making the sisters watch their sister burn, especially when they know that their sister hasn't done anything. And I mean, yeah, they do learn that this minor thing that they did in the morning is what caused the consequences for the rest of the day and in the future and so on and so forth. And it kind of shows that like slippery slope snowball effect that little actions can have. I wasn't here for it. And so for me, the episode really wasn't strong, and I gave it a 2 out of 10. Which brings our personal ranking so far to Witch Trial in first place and this one in second place, Morality Bites. So as a reminder of our series ranking so far, we've completed season 1 on our mostly objective ranking with a score of 73.18%. And on season 2, we're building up the score, and we are now, with the addition of 8 for this episode, at 18 out of 220. And then on the personal side, season 1's final score was 71.50%. And building up for season 2, we have 10 out of 220 so far. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 2, Episode 2, Morality Bites. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.